here as your closing presenter and do a synopsis of everything that was said the last day and a half. But then I'd start feeling like one of those political analysts that are on after debates and the president's speech and so forth and so on. And that's not my forte. So let's talk about what brought us here. Obviously, it was mitigation. Mitigation means a lot of things to a lot of people. If I were to poll each and every one of you in this room, I'd find that your definition of mitigation is just a little bit different than the next person. And that's okay, because we're different people. We come from different backgrounds and different disciplines. For the purposes of this discussion, I want to define mitigation as any sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate long-term risk and vulnerability to life and property from a hazard event. It's what we do. It's what we do to make our surroundings safer. It's what we do to prevent the build, disaster, rebuild cycle. It's about sustainability. It's about resiliency. And I personally like to think of it as the kissing cousins to preparedness. So that's the what in relation to what we're all doing here. The more important, however, is the how. Let me start out by saying that millions of individuals continue to live and invest in property that is at risk of a hazard, and possibly even multiple hazards. This isn't a new phenomenon, and it's not going to be a surprise to anybody in this room. More alarmingly still, in the vast number of communities that issue permits, because a lot don't, they continue to issue permits for at-risk development with little regard to requirements for higher standards to address the risk at hand. Again, this isn't a surprising statement that I'm making to the practitioners in this room. And then worse still, we as a nation continue to utilize investment strategies that often, in essence, encourage intensified uses in at-risk areas. The problem is not enough has been done to educate the policymakers, to educate the consumer, and to educate the end user, and that is the American public, about the risk, about the propensity toward that risk. And then we have the problem of strapped local budgets, fatigued local officials, and they're doing little more than complying with known standards of the building code, of the NFIP, and other essential regulatory standards if they're dealing with any at all. Future losses are in their path, and they don't even have the energy to get out of the way of them. For decades, the federal and state role in disaster assistance was rapid response and recovery, with little if no concern for mitigation. I'm not throwing rocks here, it's just how it was. The result was that damage-prone homes, businesses, and infrastructure were replaced, and often replaced again, sometimes with the very same standards that caused them to be damaged or destroyed in the first place. I've been told that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again in the same manner. And so I'm going to have to refer to this as insanity. Only in the last 20 plus years has mitigation become an important element of the recovery process. Yet, sadly, it still hasn't come far enough, mostly because there's such a backlog of work to be done that it's hard to plan for, engage for the future. But we must. We must utilize higher building standards, we must avoid at-risk areas, and we must employ sustainable development practices in how we build and how we rebuild. That's the how. But for today's discussion, I want to talk to you about the why. As a floodplain manager, I could give you 1,000 examples of why we do mitigation. But I'm not going to pull from my floodplain manager background. But I'm going to share a little story with you. The scene is Joplin, Missouri. May 22nd, 2011. An American family Rusty and Edie Howard were out having dinner with their 2 children. Seemed like a normal task to do. And they were headed home. Edie got in one car and went one way, and Rusty got in the car with 2 kids, Harley, who was 5, and Hayes, who was 19 months, and left in the other car. And suddenly there were sirens going on everywhere. Bedlam was ensuing. They had a monster tornado coming their way. And all Rusty Howard knew to do was to find safety for him and his 2 precious children. And so he called his wife on the phone. He said, Edie, don't worry about me. I'll be okay. I'm going to go to the Home Depot. Big building. I'll be fine. That's where I'm going. I'm going to take the kids. And everything will be okay. Don't worry about me. So Rusty took his kids to the Home Depot only to find the front door locked, which was standard procedure. But one of the employees, Dean Wells, saw him and other people standing at the front door, needing a place to get in for safety. So Dean Wells, risking his own life, unlocked the door and let him in. And as they were making their way toward the unreinforced training room, which was the only safe place in that building to go, because they didn't have an emergency shelter or a safe room, the roof came off the building, and a 100,000-pound concrete wall fell intact, crushing Dean Wells, Rusty Howard, and his 2 children, and 4 other people beneath it. Rescue workers described finding Rusty Howard with his arms securely around that Christian. But you know what? The Joplin Home Depot never let the building codes. But it was incredibly at risk from the devastation of that particular tornado that day due to its tilt-up wall construction. I got a lesson on tilt-up wall construction. Apparently what they do is they pour these nice, big concrete slabs. They use a crane to lift them up in place, and then they kind of hold them up with other things, wood and whatever, stabilize them, so they can put the roof on the building. Now, if you've ever been in a Home Depot or a Lowe's, look up. It's just a steel girder system and generally just a metal roof. But what happens is when that roof comes off and that metal girder system is compromised, those walls fall down like dominoes, making the failure of the wall system even more catastrophic. Larry Tanner, an engineer and tornado expert, was described as being aghast at how extensive the Joplin Home Depot's failure was. Still, Home Depot defended their building standards, saying that they had used it in nearly hundreds of stores of over 2,000 facilities. Here's the important factor to consider, however. 2 other big box retailers in the same intersection, Academy Sports and Walmart, while they suffered some damage, did not suffer the devastating damage that Home Depot suffered. At a recent Joplin City Council meeting, council members said that they might consider putting hurricane foots into the code, and they might use some beefed up concrete block foundations, but they indicated that they really weren't comfortable with doing any major code changes because, after all, they didn't want to increase the cost to anybody or make the businesses move to nearby towns. I'm personally a little disgusted by that. If Missouri had a statewide code, Joplin wouldn't have to talk about increasing their building codes. But sadly, they don't. In fact, they tried twice and suffered defeats both times. Even the lead for the Interim Committee on Disaster Recovery, State Representative Shane Scholler, was quoted as saying that he was leaning against a statewide code. Even with the death toll reaching 156, 8,000 homes being destroyed, 500 businesses being damaged. Scholler indicated that they were not going to open. And what happened? We're going to be very prudent, he said. So what is left is what Tim Marshall, an engineer and meteorologist from Texas, called acceptable risk. It's acceptable risk in this part of the country, Marshall said. We are at the mercy of the building codes, and that is 90-mile-per-hour winds. And anything above that, well, all bets are off. A team of ASCE engineers was quoted as saying that the Joplin residents cannot rely on the current building codes. Home Depot spokesmen say they are so confident in their construction practices that they're going to build the Home Depot back exactly like it was. Well, don't be too alarmed. They have decided that as part of the new construction, since they have to rebuild it anyway, that they'll put a storm shelter in. I got to thinking about that, however. If that storm shelter is inside a building built with those tilt-up walls at 100,000 pounds apiece, I have to wonder if the storm shelter's going to be able to withstand the walls coming down. I remind you that the Home Depot met local building codes. But try telling that to Edie Howard. She has lost her entire family. And I rather doubt that Miss Howard thinks of her two precious children and her devoted husband as acceptable risk. That's the why. Why we need mitigation, why we need it now. The loss of even one more life is much too high a price to pay for our not doing something and doing it right now. Thank you.